January 22nd, 2019. It just occurred to me. So today's Tuesday. It's the highlight of my week because it's the night that I spend for almost 4 hours at the Marsh in a workshop, which is just like diving into the luscious pudding of creative process in collaboration. And so what just occurred to me as I was pulling up to my driveway, arriving home at almost 11:30 p.m. is these videos I now have a clear purpose for, which is not about life coaching and not about, eradicating shame or promoting health, although it could do all those things. It's a document of a vital creative process in my life. And it's about acknowledging this inner voice, which I've had the image of the inner voice staying inside, being silent and being the guide from inside. Because for me to hear my inner voice, it took this extensive process of getting all the noise out of my head, which were other people's voices that I had taken on as my own masters. And then getting to the quiet where I was able to finally hear something from the inside that felt like it might be me, that it might be true. And then, figuring out, okay, what do I do with it? How do I be in the world from that place? And that's been this years-long recovery process of exploring and discovering and allowing discovery. And I get to be in the presence of people who are at various stages of life, but mostly over 40, some over 50, talking about or trying to find the story that they need to tell, that talks about losing their voice and then somehow in the course of making this show, finding it again. And that's what this has been about for me since last year, finding my speaking voice for the truth, the painful truth, not the parroted, imitated truth of some authority that knows how to solve my life problems, which helped for a while. I needed to search outside my box, right, of which was my sort of handbook and rules for living prior to 2009. And then, so my next set of teachers happened to be spiritual teachers, which had another set of rules and handbooks. And that led me in parallel to spirituality is trust and faith and life as creative process. So those things sort of tumbled out, but they're parallel but not overlapping paths. And I was finding frustration trying to adhere to the quote spiritual path as I was perceiving it through all of these convoluted filters of communities and gurus and various forms and masks that were none of which were themselves the essence. They were different costumes, if you will. And what came out of that frustration was delving into the actual creative process of making art as I defined it. I accessed it through, I never considered music an art because I was never allowed to show up in my music. I was always trying to reproduce some idea of mastery that was fed to me through recordings, concepts, and rigidity of judgment about what was right, wrong, beautiful, ugly, etc. So that was just my perspective going in. It's not everyone's, obviously. There's so many different ways people are introduced to music. Mine happened to be that, so I didn't consider that my art. And I think most people are surprised by that when I say that because of how I'm currently showing up in my music, which is sort of a byproduct, an after product of my other creative process and spiritual growth in my life, not the other way around. So when I said that I kind of came out of the frustration of trying to conform to spirituality as a concept and fell into creative process as making art, it started with collage was my first entry. Then I got encouraged by friends to explore acrylic paint as well as different mixed media and drawing and illustration. And really the freedom of combining any of the above into anything. And so you could see some of my very earliest collages behind me on the walls. And I still love these because they're from that place of naivete and innocence and total freedom from constraint of ideas. And this is before I considered myself an artist, which is one of the most, can be either completely liberating or completely constraining, depending on what it does to your brain when you say, I'm an artist. And for me, it did both. I had this period of liberation when I claimed inside myself I was an artist, and then a period of constraint when I declared myself professionally as like, this is how I'm going to make all of my money, selling my art and promoting myself as a bookmaker, illustrator, just any way that I could. Those were fun years, and I did a lot of really cool exploration with how I could do that. Like, how could I craft a life where it was just all around my illustration? I just found that there wasn't enough of me in my illustration to sustain me, to feed the part of me that embarked on this entire process originally, which goes back to inner voice. You know, that whole grappling. Why was my inner voice so obscured from view? And of course, in getting into the personal specifics of that, I may touch on the universal answers to that question for so many humans. You know, what obscures our inner voice and our intuition from view? And how do we get it back again? How do we access it? But not in a self-help advice kind of a way, but in a hero's journey kind of a way. And so what I'm now uncovering and what happened tonight in the class specifically was first of all, this week, like 2 days ago, I actually wrote down by hand some monologues of different characters that were living inside my head. And I tend to like imagine from a seeing place, like I can picture something somewhere inside me. And then I sort of hear what the character might be saying inside me and I feel into it. And I usually kind of show up at the class with that feeling and that vision. And then I just improvise through the body. And this week, I played with perhaps taking a shot at writing it down by hand from that place of seeing and feeling. Then today, earlier in the afternoon before I left for class, I took those handwritten pages and I actually typed them out. And then I was able to put them in a binder and look at them on a page. So that was a very different experience from than like holding it all inside and then letting it spill out in spontaneity and then kind of remembering what I liked and carrying it forward in memory, which works. So actually how I created my entire 40-minute show, which none of it was written. None of the actual words I would say was written down. I wrote like little cue cards on index cards that were like one or two words that would like jog my memory into a scene, but then everything in that scene was totally improvised. Glad I got it on video because I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that again or whether that will ever be my process again. So again, documenting creative process is really vital to me, and that's what this is. So for the subscribers that I'm losing, which I'm actually proud that I'm going in such a new direction and revealing such a different aspect of me that I'm losing subscribers. Um, I understand because I'm no longer trying to attract people by what I say. I'm documenting my own creative process, which I know will be educational and inspirational to some people somewhere at some time. And if anything, for me, will be an amazing document of a time in my life where that inner voice is becoming an outer voice. And so here was the discovery of tonight, that I have been afraid to give voice through my own vocal cords to the voices inside my head that are not mine, but hold me hostage by their admonitions and their fears and their warnings and their projections about what my life will be if I don't follow their advice, and their disappointment in me for the choices that I've made or haven't made, or and all of these things that live inside my head as voices that I know are not my own, and yet I want them to be as quiet as possible. I want to get rid of them. I don't want to acknowledge that they exist. I am embarrassed that I'm controlled by these voices. And my whole life, I have kept them silent. I have told no one, and I have not even allowed myself through my own vocal cords to give them a voice outside my body out of fear that they would take over, that suddenly they would have power if I gave them my voice. I'm talking about my physical voice, knowing that they're not mine, knowing exactly who they belong to and where they came from. And what I'm discovering in this creative process, my creative process, is every time I use the theatrical forum, the stage, as I'm creating it, to make these voices into their own characters, let them enlarge, take up space, become four-dimensional, and give them all of the emotion that they carry inside me, I become less afraid of them. I become bolder and stronger in the face of them. And I'm talking about I, the real me, that owns the inner voice, which is mine, that has been smothered by these outer voices that I've taken in. So by giving those outer voices a character and voice through my voice, I actually make space for my inner voice to come through these vocal cords, which it has not really yet in my show. And that was pointed out to me by Kenny, the assistant teacher tonight, where it's like, hey, it might be important for you to actually have your voice instead of all these, characters that you're having talk about you. And I'm totally aware that I had to, like, that voice I can't write first. I actually have been doing a year-plus long process of writing toward that, but from the outer edges first, like all of the other voices that reside in my head and take up space inside. And by giving them external voice, somehow I free myself from their grip. And that's surprising. That is a discovery, because I really thought that by keeping them hidden and silent, I keep silent from out of the way, and to let it unfold in the time that my life allowed it to unfold. And here it is. And you can make the quantum leaps because but into it worse that they are. This is